This is a breaking news edition of the I-24 News Desk. I'm Nicole Zedek, live in Tel Aviv. People around the country are waking up to the 7th day of war here in Israel. Over the past week, the death toll has climbed to more than 1,300 lives lost. And while rocket alerts continue to blare through the south during the overnight hours, Israel is striking back in the Gaza Strip. The IDF recently hit 5 residential homes that allegedly housed members of Hamas, including the brother of Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar. Now, Israeli military has now warned more than 1 million Gazans to head south within the next 24 hours away from the Israel-Gaza border, according to the UN. And the IDF has officially asked all residents of Gaza City to evacuate. Israeli attacks have killed 1,500 Palestinians, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. However, that number does not distinguish between Hamas terrorists and innocent civilians. While troops are mobilizing in southern Israel, northern Israel is also preparing for attacks from the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. The Iranian foreign minister was greeted by representatives of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad when he landed in Beirut on Thursday. Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdollahian had a clear threat to Israel that if the pounding in Gaza continues, the war may open on other fronts. And while the unrest continues inside Israel's borders, Hamas is calling on its supporters for a day of rage around the world, as Israelis and Jews abroad are urged to stay alert for violence today. Now, with everything happening, let's begin with the latest out of the South, where I-24 News correspondent Mary McAuliffe is in Sderot. Mary, more red alerts last night, but nothing in the recent morning hours. So what's the feeling down there? Are there any residents left, or have they all been asked to evacuate?
That's right, Nicole. So coming into the city, we didn't see any residents on the way in. It is still early this morning, but all residents from this area have been ordered to evacuate. This is after the mayor of Sderot yesterday called for all residents to evacuate and calling for the government to make an official evacuation notice, and that was passed last night. All of these residents have been here under constant rocket fire since this war began over 6 days ago. So here it is very quiet in the area. We are still surrounded at this entrance to the city, where there are a number of Israeli forces in the area guarding this entrance to the city and really on high alert. In the background, we can hear heavy machinery, tanks, and artillery fire who are firing into the Gaza Strip. And also on our way in here to this area, we could see plumes of smoke rising from within the Gaza Strip. So we know Israeli forces are still operating here right now.
Well, and Israel has said that they have gained control of the border fence, likely no more Hamas terrorists able to get in through any security breaches. But is there the possibility that there are still remaining terrorists in the south right now?
Of course, Nicole, that is the main fear, and that is why we are seeing so many different Israeli forces who have been stationed in this area in numerous different border communities where we did see those infiltrations last week. Really, the number of those known, if there are still infiltrates inside the south, they're not really giving much information on. They do say they have secured the area, and for now, most of those residents are safe, but they were calling for those residents to evacuate, more so due to the rocket fire, rather than saying that was due to believed infiltrators in the area.
Mary McAuliffe, thank you so much for everything you're doing down there. Please stay safe for us. We appreciate it. Now I want to bring in our guests in studio. I'm joined with Guy Azriel, I-24 News senior editor, along with over Zoom, retired Colonel Miri Eisen, director of International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University in Israel, and former head of combat intelligence for the IDF, joining me from Tel Aviv. Thank you both so much for being here. Guy, I want to start with you. We're hearing more about the IDF's attacks here and more of their tactics, everything that's happening with the Gaza Strip, them urging everyone to evacuate, Gazan citizens to evacuate from the north as well as evacuate from Gaza City. What can you tell us about the latest?
Yes, Nicole, this is certainly, I believe, the most significant development in this war that Israel waged on Hamas in Gaza since the start, since the attack that took place on Saturday morning. The IDF, just a few minutes ago, publishing the following statement. The IDF calls on the evacuation of all civilians from Gaza City from their their homes. This evacuation is for your own safety. You will be able to return to Gaza City only when another announcement is given. Evacuate south for your own safety and the safety of your families, and distance yourself from Hamas terrorists who are using you as human shields. We are immediately hearing from the UN's warning of devastating humanitarian consequences, and that reaction from the UN is being hit by a response from the Israeli envoy to the UN, Gilad Erdan, saying that their reaction to that warning to Israel, to Gazan civilians to leave their homes, is a disgrace. It is for many years that the UN closes its eyes in front of the arming of Hamas and its use of civilian population and civilian infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. And now, instead of standing next to the state of Israel, whose citizens were slaughtered by Hamas militants, it preaches Israel. And what do you think is the response of Hamas to this warning? Israel warns Gaza residents to leave for their safety. Well, Hamas is calling on the residents to not follow the order and remain there. That is not surprising. Hamas's main tool here is the civilian population. Hamas enjoys civilian casualties. This is its weapon when it comes to the world for the narrative that it likes to present. The last thing on Hamas's mind is the well-being of the civilians in Gaza.
Guy, I appreciate you breaking this all down for us. Miri, I want to cross to you now, because as the IDF continues to warn these civilians in Gaza, they're also warning Hamas terrorists. So does this weaken their approach in any way?
In no way whatsoever. Not only are we on the high moral ground, we are in a war. We're in the ugliest, dirtiest war that has ever been. And I want to say in the sense that this is beyond comprehension, and everybody's trying to frame it as if this is the same as something that happened in the past. This is so unprecedented. We're going to go in, and we are going, and I'm using the term carefully, crush the Hamas infrastructure terrorists inside where they have hidden, built themselves, and strengthened themselves for so many years. We have never done so before. Look at what we're doing, Nicole. We're giving them early warning. We've been giving them early warning for days now. Everybody keeps asking, what's taking us so long? We're telling them to leave, that we are going to literally crush down that Hamas infrastructure. So this is Israel going on the initiative. This is Israel going to attack. It is not going to be any easier after this. But I feel stronger in the sense that at least we're going after the hardcore infrastructure that will fester otherwise. And I remind us all, Hamas, a tenth of what Hezbollah has in Lebanon. So we're very focused on down south, but that is still hovering up north.
Miri, with this latest news also continuing to urge all of those civilians to evacuate, does this also signal a ground invasion, the start of something much more?
The ground operation was a given. We've been talking about this for days. As we say, this is not something easy and happy. We're in the worst times that there are ever. And when you have this kind of a terror organization that has so grown and been helped and backed, and look at how the world right now, the horrific world that has been, not all of the people, this is not the West, but there are too many voices out there who are backing Hamas. This isn't about the Hamas. Israel is warning the civilians. The Hamas are murderous terrorists. And in that sense, the ground operation is something which you cannot really crush those capabilities without going in. It is harsh. It will be hard for us, but it is an absolute necessity to be able to bring about some kind of a new reality, certainly when it comes to Hamas terror.
Well, and Miri, while all of this is happening, we know there's also current hostages being held in Gaza, nearly 100 confirmed hostages remaining there. Some speculation that there could be dozens more, but Israel and the United States releasing very little information about this. So as this continues to escalate, how does that impact the hostage situation?
A hostage situation is the most complicated one that the world has ever known. Have you ever heard of a terror attack that, aside from murdering, brutality, etc., of thousands of Israeli citizens, is also taken in from all of these different places? They're also in the Gaza Strip, and those same Hamas terrorists who are telling their own civilians, stay, don't leave, because they use them as human shields. Nicole, they most definitely are using the Israeli hostages as their own shields. It's called the complication within the situation. These are the difficult decisions that need to be made. We need to try, but to be able to get to them, you have to do the ground operation. You cannot get to them otherwise in any case.
And meanwhile, we're also hearing from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was speaking to the Knesset about that hostage situation. Let's hear what the Prime Minister had to say.
We're still working on locating the kidnapped. We need to bring in more special officers, forensics. We'll receive assistance from abroad to identify bodies, to know who is alive, who is dead, who was kidnapped. We will not let go of this effort. We will not let go of trying to return them back home. The Shabbat of October 7th will be remembered as a cursed and black day in the history of nations. And for us, the people of Israel, this is the most horrifying day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Meanwhile, with all of this action happening in the south, we do know that troops are also preparing for the possibility of another attack on the northern front in northern Israel. That's where our correspondent, Pia Steckelback, is right now. Pia, there's a sense of relative calm, but we know that that could change at a moment's notice. What are you hearing up there?
Correct, Nicole. It is a quite tense calm as of now. No sirens, no alerts triggered throughout the night. However, yesterday, 3 times alerts were triggered in the Upper Galilee region. The last one in the area of Kiryat Shmona, a major city here in the north, turned out to be a false alarm. That really shows you how sensitive the area is and how sensitive also Israeli air defense system are tuned, because residents here are aware of the fact that any smaller security incident could lead to the war also coming here to the north. The possibility of Hezbollah joining the war is very much real. We know that the Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian has arrived to Beirut yesterday night. This is where he said that, as he called it, the Zionist entity, meaning Israel, might trigger the entry of another front into the war because of the atrocities, as he said, committed in Gaza. Now, he was supposed to arrive to Syria. However, the airports in Damascus and Aleppo were targeted by an airstrike yesterday, an airstrike that is claimed on Israel, as has been many strikes in the past, as Israel is known, or is at least claimed, to target Iranian targets in Syria to prevent weapon deliveries to coming to countries like Lebanon and Syria. Now, there's also been the naming of another soldier by the Israeli army yesterday night who was killed in the firing of mortar shells by Hezbollah on Wednesday. So the scene here is very, very sensitive, very much volatile, and you do not see a lot of people here on the streets. Of course, it is still early on a Friday morning. We have been here in the area also yesterday. People also had a false alarm triggered on Thursday, which sent really hundreds of thousands of people all over the north into their shelters. So people do know that they have to stay close to their homes, close to their shelters, and they're prepared for a possible escalation that could be very much on the horizon here, Nicole.
Exactly, Pia, especially with what you said about the Iranian foreign minister in Beirut, in Syria, all of these different Iranian proxies in Lebanon as well. What's the sense on the ground? Is anyone evacuating any residents at this point?
Well, residents that are very, very close to the border in some areas were recommended to evacuate. Now, we're here in the major city of Nahariya. People do not go out into the streets if they do not necessarily have to. Shops are also closed here in the north, of course, other than supermarkets. People do know that they have to prepare in terms of food and water, that they have to prepare their shelters. We had the chance to speak to a few people yesterday. That very much adds to their anxiety, of course, when false alarms are triggered. But again, that really just shows you how sensitive the Israeli air defense systems are treating any minor incident or even only alert. They are very much sensitive and aware of the fact that any incident, as I said, could drag this other front, the northern front, into the war. And residents here know that too. We're about 11 kilometers, that is much less than 10 miles away from the border. You can almost see Lebanon from here. And of course, in case anything happens, there are a lot of also villages and towns that are very, very, very close to the border here. And what the Israeli forces are really trying to prevent are scenes that are similar to the south, such as infiltrations. We've been told that in some cities, even closer to the border, Israeli soldiers are patrolling the streets to really try and prevent any scenario that is close to the south in terms of infiltrations. But that also, of course, adds to a sense of security for the residents here to see the army presence. When we drove up here yesterday, we saw quite a lot of movement of army vehicles on the streets. We saw a tank as well. And we know that Israel has mobilized 360,000 reservists, and many of them are stationed here in military bases all across the north, Nicole.
Pia Steckelbach, our I-24 News correspondent, thank you so much for bringing us the latest up there on Israel's northern border. Now, Guy, I want to come back to you because we continue to learn more about the really atrocious acts of violence that Hamas terrorists committed when they infiltrated these southern communities. Now we're hearing more proof that as people are claiming they are worse than ISIS, now we actually have some proof that members hold that same ISIS ideology. What can you tell us that the army has found?
Perhaps not surprising at all. Just yesterday, IDF publishes photos of an ISIS flag found on the bodies of one of the terrorists in Kibbutz Sufa. That is one of the communities very close to the border on the southern part of the Gaza border. It is believed that the terrorists who killed many residents of that kibbutz plan to raise the flag. They were eventually eliminated by the Israeli forces. Another, I think, example of those close ideological ties between these two groups. I think something that is much easier for the world really to understand when you link these two groups. That's the same as we heard from Defense Minister Gallant, from Netanyahu. Hamas is ISIS. ISIS is Hamas, a radical Islamist murderous group, not a group that cares about the well-being of their people, but only engaged in a mission of killing Jews. And we're also getting more information about the attack plans of these terrorists, how they were able to make it into Israeli territory, the very exact plans that they had. An attack file that was found in one of the kibbutzes just a few days ago on the bodies of one of the terrorists, first of all, is titled from October 22. So if that is correct, that means obviously they have been planning this attack for more than a year now. This is also goes with what we heard before. A very detailed attack plan on one of the kibbutzes with a lot of information about the defense systems in that kibbutz, how the terror squads are supposed to attack the kibbutz, how many residents are there, and how quickly can they infiltrate into the kibbutz before any IDF intervention comes. As we know, that IDF intervention was very late to come in most of these communities where we saw hundreds of victims, hundreds of civilians slaughtered in their homes on that Saturday morning, including toddlers, babies, children, women, elderly. Those who were not slaughtered, many of them were kidnapped into the hands of Hamas in Gaza. Over 100 Israelis captive by Hamas today.
And as we continue to learn more about these atrocious acts that you're mentioning, Guy, we're also knowing that many members of political figures, even in the United States, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, stating that he's now seen images of these horrific acts. Take a listen.
So we did see photographs, videos that the Israeli government shared with us. Some, I think, has actually already been seen in public media. Others were new to me, and I think new to our team. It's hard to find the right words. It's beyond what anyone would ever want to imagine, much less actually see and, God forbid, experience. A baby, an infant, riddled with bullets. Soldiers beheaded. Young people burned alive in their cars or in their hideaway rooms. I could go on, but it's simply depravity in the worst imaginable way.
Now, I want to go back to retired Colonel Miri Eisen. Miri, as we continue to see these clear connections to ISIS, these clear connections to these horrific attacks that the international community is now seeing firsthand with photos, with footage, do you think that the international response has been enough after seeing this?
The international governmental response has been immense when we're talking about the leadership and the actions in the United States, in Europe, and all of these countries. I absolutely think that they both understand that this kind of attack is something that happened here. And this is not about the Palestinians. This is about a ISIS type attack, Hamas ISIS type attack that could happen anywhere. And that scares them. Having said that, Nicole, we all have to breathe deep. We're all aware of the fact that on the ground, meaning public opinion, social media, there is the most horrific narrative going around, which is absolutely horrible, which completely and absolutely denies what's going on. And in that sense, I'll tell you who I am the most disappointed in, and it's going to be odd saying this perhaps on I-24 News. My disappointment is in people who have been raised in the West, who talk English like you and me, people like Queen Raina of Jordan, who have not stood up with an open voice and said anything about these atrocities. Au contraire, they've gone and they have supported Hamas. This isn't about supporting the Gazan people. We're the ones who are calling the Gazan people to move and get out of those Hamas strongholds. Hamas is telling them to stay. Have the guts to stand up and look at this and understand it, and understand that this is something that threatens them too. So there's an enormous gap between the Western leadership and, in some areas, the Western people. And there's an enormous gap when it comes to the narrative that is running in the greater Palestinian support world, where they're not separating between Palestinian and Hamas's ISIS. And that is a huge mistake for all of them. When I say mistake, it's beyond moral understanding.
And Miri, as we continue to hear about everything that's happening here in the international response, we know that Hamas is now calling for a day of rage around the world. Guy Azriel, I want to come back to you now. When we're hearing this international call from Hamas supporters around the world to have a day of rage, Israelis, Jews abroad are told to stay vigilant today, as there could be acts of violence. What can we expect?
Yes, first of all, I'm just as shocked as Miri is with the reaction of so many in the Western world. I'm hearing from my friends in New York about protesters supporting Hamas, people born and raised in the U.S., who were brought up in a democratic state, in a country that has been fighting terror for so many years, terror groups that fight against everything that the U.S. and the West stands for freedom, democracy. These are the people that were slaughtered in Israel, in that nature party, in these kibbutzes, peace-loving people, innocent people, and it is quite astonishing to see the shameful reaction from so many on the streets in Paris, in New York, in other places as well. Next to, of course, also many calls of support that we have seen. Yes, the Hamas is calling on his supporters to go on a day of rage, calling to target Israeli and Jewish institutes. Again, illustrates very easily how the ideology is not about any territorial claim. This is a racist, Nazi-like ideology of wanting to slaughter Jews, as they did in Israel, and they want to do there. The Israeli Foreign Ministry is calling on Israelis abroad and the representatives to be very vigilant ahead of this day. We hope that what we saw in Israel will not happen in other communities of Israelis and Jews around the world.
I think this day of rage does show a clear picture of exactly everything that's happening, not only here in Israel, but around the world. Miri, let's come back to you. This is a tough question, I think, to answer, but it's something that we're hearing from Jews in Israel's around the world. We are in a war here in Israel, yet we continue to see Israelis and Jews come back here, many of them wanting to fight for the country, but also many of them worried about hate crimes that they could experience abroad. Is it safer for Jews right now in Israel than it is for them abroad?
I think that we're safe as the Jewish people because we are strong and we've prevailed. And Nicole, that's one of those aspects where we're still standing. We're those people who have been here for thousands of years, and this is not going to destroy us also. And I say that in that sense because we have viewers all around the world. This is an incredible low point, and we're standing. And as you're showing the view of the anti-Israel protests, you, of course, could also show the pro-Israel aspects that are going out there. When I look look at those anti-Israel protests, I want to remind us, look at what they're saying. It's not about free Palestine, that one, or the voices out there. It's that they're supporting Hamas, and they're supporting people who are saying from the sea to the land, meaning they're talking about the demolition and annihilation of Israel. What they attacked on Saturday morning is in the heart of the regular communities of the state of Israel, of who we are. It's absolutely, as Guy said, against our existence at all. So Jews are going to be, and we will continue to be, and we will be in Israel, and we will be in diasporas around the world. Hamas made this call for the day of rage day before yesterday, before we're at the intensity of the attacks against their strongholds, when they were already holding an amount of hostages, not that they're saying how many they have, how many they have already killed, how many they have already executed. So we need in that sense to be vigilant. We need in that sense to be strong. We need to know that it's not just that we're on the moral high ground. That doesn't help us when we're protecting ourselves, but that we have to breathe in deep. We know how to get past these things. Be vigilant, be careful, talk to your neighbor. The people who are going out there and yelling and screaming against the existence of the state of Israel, I want to be like in France right now, because that was one of the most amazing things that happened in the last 24 hours, is that France disallowed pro-Palestinian protests in France, and that is quite amazing.
It's true. The response that we are seeing from different governments and political leaders has been strong, even if the public opinion is a little bit weaker. Miri Eisen, thank you so much for all of your insight on this. Guy, really quickly before we head out for a break, as we're talking about the international response, also people coming together here in Israel, right? Let's end on a good note of just the support that we're seeing here.
Nicole, it's quite amazing to see the reaction both here and abroad. In Israel, people who were protesting against the government are the ones who are collecting all sorts of equipment for the residents of the south and also for the soldiers. We're seeing people from all walks of life in the Israeli population. It's quite amazing to see. And also from abroad, we can talk about that later.
It is. So that's the note we're going to head out on. We'll continue to bring you the latest on this breaking edition of the I-24 News Desk.